The world of American politics is often loud, filled with voices competing for attention. Charlie Kirk's voice was one of the loudest. As the founder of Turning Point USA, he built a conservative youth movement from the ground up. He reached millions through social media, campus events, and his own media empire. His message resonated deeply with many young conservatives who felt their views were ignored by mainstream culture. Kirk championed free markets, limited government, and what he called traditional American values. He was a constant presence, a force that could not be ignored, shaping conversations and, for many, defining what it meant to be a young Republican in the 21st century. His influence was undeniable, a testament to his drive and his ability to connect with a specific audience. However, his rise was not without significant controversy and opposition. Critics accused Kirk of promoting divisive rhetoric and spreading misinformation. They pointed to his aggressive debating style and his organization's tactics as sources of political polarization. For every supporter who saw him as a courageous truth-teller, there was a detractor who viewed him as a grifter, exacerbating the country's deepest divides. His events were often met with protests, and his online presence was a battleground of heated arguments. This constant conflict seemed to fuel him, making him a lightning rod in the ongoing culture wars. He was a figure who lived in the extremes, celebrated by his followers and condemned by his opponents with equal passion. This complex and often combative public life is what makes his sudden and violent death so profoundly shocking. His story is not just about one man's journey, it is a reflection of the state of our nation. It highlights the deep fissures in our society and the dangerous places our political disagreements can lead. The silencing of his voice, regardless of one's opinion of it, has forced a difficult and uncomfortable national conversation. Tonight, we look at the full story. We will trace his path from a determined young activist to a national political figure. We will examine the events that led to that fateful day at Utah Valley University, and we will explore the difficult questions his tragic end leaves behind. Charlie Kirk's journey began not in the halls of an Ivy League university, but in the suburbs of Chicago. Born in 1993, he was a product of a middle-class upbringing. His political awakening happened early. As a high school student, he volunteered for a United States Senate campaign, getting his first taste of political organizing. He gained some local notice for an essay he wrote for Breitbart News, claiming that liberal bias in textbooks was a pervasive problem in the American education system. This early focus on academia and perceived liberal indoctrination would become a central theme of his entire career. It was a message that found a receptive audience among those who felt that higher education was moving in a direction that left them behind. Instead of attending a four-year university, Kirk took a different path. In 2012, at just 18 years old, he founded Turning Point USA in his parents' garage. His mission was clear and ambitious: to identify young people, to educate young people, to organize young people, to promote fiscal responsibility, to promote free markets, to promote limited government. With initial seed money from conservative donors, Kirk began building his organization from the ground up. He traveled from campus to campus, speaking to small groups of students, slowly building a network. His youth was his greatest asset. He was not a distant older figure but a peer who spoke the language of the students he sought to persuade. The growth of Turning Point USA was meteoric. Kirk proved to be a prodigious fundraiser and a charismatic organizer. The organization's Professor Watch List, which listed academics it accused of discriminating against conservative students, drew widespread condemnation, but also generated significant publicity. His supporters saw him as a brave warrior fighting against a stifling liberal orthodoxy on college campuses. They flocked to his events, drawn by his confident and unapologetic defense of conservative ideals. Charlie Kirk's genius was in understanding the modern media landscape. He knew that to reach young people, he had to meet them where they were, on their phones. He mastered the art of the viral social media post, crafting sharp, concise messages that were easily shareable. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. His content was designed for maximum impact: bold graphics, provocative questions, short video clips. This digital strategy allowed him to bypass traditional media gatekeepers and speak directly to a massive audience. For his followers, his feed was a source of daily affirmation, a constant stream of content that reinforced their worldview and armed them with talking points for political debates. His speaking style was a key component of his appeal. On stage, Kirk was confident, articulate, relentlessly on message. He employed a rapid-fire delivery, moving quickly from one point to another, right versus wrong, freedom versus socialism, patriotism versus globalism. This style was incredibly effective in a debate setting, or a short media appearance. He rarely conceded a point, and was skilled at deflecting criticism by pivoting to his core message. To his supporters, this was a sign of strength and conviction. To his detractors, it was evidence of a debater more interested in winning than in engaging with nuance or facts. This approach reshaped political discourse, especially among younger Americans. Kirk popularized a confrontational style of engagement in the classroom, online, at the family dinner table. His influence extended beyond social media and campus events. The American Comeback Tour was classic Charlie Kirk. It was a multi-state series of campus events designed to rally young conservatives ahead of the upcoming election cycle. On the evening of September 10, 2025, the tour arrived at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. The atmosphere was charged. A crowd of several hundred supporters had gathered inside the university's auditorium outside. A smaller but vocal group of protesters had assembled, holding signs and chanting slogans. The division that so often defined Kirk's public life was on full display, a physical manifestation of the online battles that raged around him daily. Security for the event was heightened. University police and private security personnel were stationed both inside and outside the venue. Attendees had to pass through metal detectors, a precaution that had become routine. Inside, the mood was electric. Kirk took the stage to thunderous applause, launching into his speech with his characteristic energy. He spoke of freedom, the dangers of progressivism, the importance of fighting for America's future. For the first 20 minutes, it was a typical Turning Point USA event, a mix of political rhetoric, cultural commentary, and calls to action. The chaos erupted without warning. Eyewitness accounts describe a series of loud pops, initially mistaken by some for firecrackers or a technical malfunction with the sound system. The confusion quickly turned to terror as Charlie Kirk stumbled backward and fell to the stage. Panic swept through the auditorium as people screamed and scrambled for cover. In the midst of the pandemonium, the shooter, who had been positioned in the audience, attempted to blend in with the fleeing crowd, creating a scene of absolute horror and confusion. The news of Charlie Kirk's death was confirmed by hospital officials just before midnight. The announcement sent shockwaves across the country, transforming a breaking news story into a national tragedy. On cable news, anchors delivered the grim update with somber tones. Across social media, the initial chaos of unconfirmed reports gave way to a flood of reactions. For a brief moment, the deep political divisions that defined Kirk's career seemed to pause, replaced by a shared sense of shock and disbelief. Prominent conservative figures and politicians expressed their profound grief and outrage. They mourned Kirk as a fallen warrior, a courageous patriot who was martyred for his beliefs. Tributes hailed him as a champion of free speech, a vital voice for a generation of conservatives. Many of his allies immediately framed the assassination as a direct result of the left's hateful rhetoric demonization of their opponents. On the other side of the aisle, political opponents and critics also responded. Mainstream Democratic leaders and progressive commentators issued statements unequivocally condemning the violence. They expressed condolences to Kirk's family. While they acknowledged their deep political disagreements with Kirk, they stressed that violence is never the answer in a democratic society. However, this unified condemnation was complicated by the darker corners of the internet, where some anonymous accounts celebrated the news, a grim reflection of the extreme polarization that Kirk himself was often accused of fueling. The media coverage was intense and all-encompassing. News organizations dispatched reporters to Orem, Utah, and began producing special reports on Kirk's life. In the hours following the assassination, a massive investigation was launched. Led by the FBI, state and local law enforcement in Utah joined the effort. The mission was clear: find the person responsible. The crime scene at Utah Valley University was a complex puzzle. Investigators meticulously combed the auditorium. The first major breakthrough came from digital evidence. The event had been live-streamed. Investigators built a massive digital mosaic, syncing hundreds of videos, to create a 360-degree view of the auditorium at the moment shots were fired. Using facial recognition software, that led to a potential match: 24-year-old Tyler Robinson. With Tyler Robinson in custody, the focus of the FBI's investigation shifted from who to why. The portrait that emerged of the 24-year-old suspect was that of a troubled and ideologically radicalized individual. Friends described Robinson as increasingly withdrawn. Family described him as consumed by online political discourse. He had dropped out of community college. He spent most of his time immersed in fringe online communities. These digital spaces were echo chambers of extreme anti-conservative sentiment. Figures like Charlie Kirk were framed as existential enemies. They were portrayed as people who needed to be stopped by any means necessary. Robinson's digital footprint showed he had fallen deep down a rabbit hole of radical ideology. Investigators pieced together his movements in the weeks before the attack. They discovered he purchased the handgun used in the shooting legally at a gun show a month prior. His online search history showed an obsession with political assassinations. It also showed a specific fixation on Charlie Kirk. He had studied Kirk's travel schedule for the American Comeback Tour. He traveled to Utah specifically for the event. The trip was a premeditated journey with a singular, violent purpose. This was not a spontaneous act of rage but a carefully planned political assassination. It was born from a toxic blend of personal isolation and ideological fanaticism. Criminologists weighed in. Sociologists weighed in. Experts described stochastic terrorism, inflammatory rhetoric from political commentators. While no one directly told Robinson to act, experts argued the constant portrayal of political opponents as evil, corrupt, dangerous. Robinson did not see himself as a murderer. He saw himself as a soldier in a righteous war. He saw himself as a hero taking action to save the country from a perceived fascist threat. Robinson's statements in custody, leaked to the press, confirmed this worldview. He showed no remorse. He told investigators he believed Charlie Kirk was a threat to democracy. The assassination of Charlie Kirk held up a harsh mirror to the face of America, and the reflection was deeply unsettling. The tragedy was more than just the murder of a single public figure. It was a symptom of a much larger disease afflicting the nation's political body. The event laid bare the terrifying depths of political polarization in the United States. It showed how political disagreement had, for some, morphed into visceral hatred. The space for civil discourse, debate, and compromise seemed to be shrinking, replaced by a zero-sum mentality where the other side is not just wrong but evil. Experts warned that this was a dangerous precipice for any democracy. The questions his death raises are ones that we, as a country, must now confront.